In another module, I introduced you to the 7 elements that comprise sustainable leadership. Now, I'd like to share with you how these elements affect the issues of long-term performance, generational success, and the continuity of organizations. When it comes to curiosity, there is an important role companies and organizations can play if they want to corner the market on generational talent. For example, many companies are now using online resumes and interview sources to attract Generation Y prospective employees. Curiosity is also a part of how companies train and retain Gen Y employees. According to the USA Today newspaper, quote, Generation Y is much less likely to respond to the traditional command and control type of management still popular in much of today's workforce, unquote. They've grown up questioning their parents, and now they're questioning their employers. They don't know how to not ask why questions. They're hungry for information, and they want to know why things work the way they do and challenge management to consider alternative ways of doing things. In California, Dr. Ilan Shabay founded a business called the New Curiosity Shop, which consults on innovative learning programs and games that are grounded in science and technology. This has proven to be very beneficial for museums, universities, and other places where science and technology are highly valued. With regard to long-term performance, I have great respect for the Japanese strategic planning process because sustainable leadership, although it is called by different names, is an important component of how the Japanese manage and grow their businesses. If you study the leading Japanese companies in most major industries, you will find they place a great deal of emphasis on long-range planning and developing their employee talent. This is not something successful companies do accidentally. On the contrary, it is a calculated strategy that has been developed and refined over decades and even centuries. Regrettably, too many companies have fixed their sights on this quarter's earnings statements and do not bother planning beyond their mid-year reports. This, I think, is a serious mistake and will result in more difficulties over the long term. As to the second essential element of sustainable leadership, thirst of knowledge, there was a 30-year period from 1970 to about 2000 when companies were seduced into hiring an army of MBA students, preferably from the most prestigious Ivy League universities around the world, who had great intellect but little, if any, experience. Over the years, human resource executives began to realize that an MBA degree, or its equivalent, did not necessarily ensure a leader's success or long-term performance. Now, this is not to demean MBA degrees. Certainly, advanced degrees can be invaluable, provided the company trains its employees in the elements of sustainable leadership. And among the most important of these elements is a thirst for knowledge. What impresses me about the emerging workforce, that is, those people between the ages of 21 and 32, are 3 things. First, they possess a thirst for knowledge. They want to know how things work and why things are done in a certain way. Secondly, they have a global perspective. They're well-traveled, articulate, they speak more than one language, and they respect other cultures. While they take pride in being Americans, Mexicans, Brazilians, or whatever their nationality is, they understand we are all tied together and that we are dependent upon each other for our economic success, stability, and world peace. These are human beings who enjoy working, but they live for the experience of discovering the best our world has to offer. So we need to understand that it's not about a job at this stage of their life. And thirdly, and this is the most exciting of the three factors, this new generation of workers believes in relationships, networking, and socializing. Consider the growth of social networks like MySpace and Facebook. This new generation of workers is joined at the hip with their friends, work associates, and family relationships through the internet, email, and websites. They'd be lost without technology. And Starbucks coffee shops just happen to be the in-place now where you will find Generation Y. Incidentally, one major change that is affecting newspapers and the media is how this generation gets its information. With very few exceptions, it is not from newspapers or the traditional television networks. This generational shift has already forced many newspapers to go out of business, and it's now forcing the major networks like ABC, NBC, and CBS in the United States to rethink how they program for a younger generation that is more comfortable texting for information than watching somebody read the news on a television screen. And speaking of television, perhaps you've noticed a dramatic increase in the number of food shows on television. It seems every chef worth his or her salt has a cable television show. There's a growing interest in how to cook, different recipes for different lifestyles, and what types of meals to cook in order to eat healthy. But another factor to consider with the rise in food shows is our heightened sense of taste and smell. But there's another dimension to our senses that we should discuss when it comes to organizational performance, and that is our sixth sense, or intuition. My experience tells me that intuitive organizations enjoy greater success because they are better able to discern and interpret ideas that lead to innovative solutions and new products or services. Arupa Tessalan, the author of the book Ting, A Surprising Way to Listen to Intuition and Do Business Better, says that the use of intuition in business has been steadily gaining in respectability over the past few years. Softer skills like intuition can influence better results in productivity, performance, cycle time, responsiveness to the business environment, adapting to change, and innovation. Each of these directly impacts profits, success, and growth in the business arena. So this is why companies are looking at ways to develop intuitive competencies and build collaborative intuition into their business processes. Let's define what kind of intuition we're talking about here. Arupa Tessalan says that, quote, intuition is typically information that arrives suddenly without expectation or effort, an insight, sudden flash, a aha, or a clear sense of knowing, unquote. Given the complex scenarios of interconnectedness of the issues that businesses face, the sense of intuition is often a superior cognitive sense. It binds results from several areas in a very rapid time frame and brings with it, when perceived correctly, a clear certainty about a favorable or unfavorable outcome at a future point in time. It's very complex. There are two kinds of insights. One that is purely intuitive, coming from unknown information, and the other kind that comes from experience. Experience in the evolving world is becoming less important than learning to adapt to a future that will be different from the past. So, greater development of the first kind of insight becomes more important as a core competency of sustainable leadership. Let me make one other important point on the subject of intuition. As Arupa Tesselin suggests, we're not talking about your mother's intuition. Intuition goes far beyond gender, role, and culture as an attribute of higher integrative intelligence. We know that to thrive in today's globally competitive business environment, we must find better ways to become intuitive, recognize it, and become skilled in using it. Intuition is a fuzzy subject and more of an art than science. While it's true that most of us are better at deriving predictability through logic as a result of excessive schooling and learning to think like a machine, intuition has an important place in strategy, business intelligence, leadership, learning and performing, and innovation, solving problems, and certainly making decisions. The direct application of intuition in business today needs to be defined and articulated. So, as you can see, it's important for your organization to find ways to cultivate the senses of your employees and customers so they can use their heightened senses to help you grow your business in dynamic, new directions. As I examined our topic of sustainable leadership and weighed the three factors of long-term performance, generational success, and the continuity of organizations which have a significant impact on sustainable leadership, I realized that so much of what we're dealing with here is ambiguous. There is no clear direction or map we can follow to guide us to a successful result. This is uncharted territory we have entered, and so we must feel our way as we go, almost like walking in the dark without the benefit of a flashlight. Let me offer a few ideas as to what I mean. In their best-selling book, First Break All the Rules, Marcus Buckingham and Kirk Kaufman write that the greatest managers in the world seem to have little in common. They differ in terms of their gender, their age, and race. They employ vastly different styles and focus on different goals. Yet, despite their differences, great managers do share one common trait. They do not hesitate to break virtually every rule held sacred by conventional wisdom. They do not believe that with enough training, a person can achieve anything he sets his mind to. They do not try to help people overcome their weaknesses. They consistently disregard the golden rule. And yes, they even play favorites. So, much of what we've been doing in the areas of long-term performance, generational success, and the continuity of organizations needs to be re-examined and probably changed given the dramatic shift in the expectations of a new generation as well as the changing needs and requirements of our customers. This is what I mean by dealing with the ambiguities of business. Now, let's turn to whole brain thinking. There's a fun exercise I like to use in my workshops to demonstrate its power. I ask the attendees to take a pen in the hand they normally write with and write, not print, the alphabet as a continuous stream while keeping their pen on the paper. Then we switch hands and repeat the alphabet exercise. It's very awkward and frustrating, but the exercise does get easier if you do it a couple of times. Why? Because our brain is capable, but our muscle memory and writing skills in this case need to be retrained and reconditioned to perform an unfamiliar exercise. The left side, home of the Human Language Center, is the outspoken, logical, linear half of the equation. The right side, home to spatial perception and nonverbal concepts, is the nonlinear, high concept source of imagination and pleasure. Ironically, with the advent of the information age, many of our high-touch muscles have atrophied, and now the challenge is to get them back into shape. Some companies have gone so far as to encourage their younger employees not to pursue MBA degrees, but instead pursue a Master of Fine Arts, or MFA, in order to stimulate the right hemisphere of our brain. The thinking is that companies need to use both the left brain and the right brain in business in order to maximize their results. This is proving to be a challenge among the new generation of workers who are wired, online, and heavily schooled in left brain tactics. In global interactions, whether in education, business, or government, social grace, fitness, and poise are imperative so as not to embarrass yourself, your organization, or your customers. This is why so many organizations are offering classes to their employees on business etiquette, meal manners, cell phone protocol, and respecting cultural differences. Personally, I do think there has been a significant decline in the art of social graces, fitness, and poise in the workplace. Part of the decline is a result of shifting values and the relaxing of certain policies in the workplace, such as allowing casual dress for comfort, a less formal atmosphere at work with daycare centers and pets being part of the office environment, and a graying of the lines between management and employees. The workplace is certainly more collegial. I think these changes are positive. However, there is a downside. In the world of international business, many companies are still tied to tradition and culture. Thus, it's very important to know how to present your business card in Asia. It's important not to show the soles of your feet in certain Mideastern countries. The concept of fitness goes beyond looking fit and trim so that your physical appearance is not a barrier to your success. Fitness also refers to such things as your ability to communicate and speak in public and convey your thoughts in a succinct way. It's an embarrassment when someone stands up in front of a group of people and babbles on without making their point. It's a deal breaker. So communication skills and the use of proper grammar are very important in today's global business environment. While the world population is changing in many ways, English remains the language of business. It should be taught and acquired as a work skill and not as a second language. It is now a global competence that every organization must adopt at all levels. Spanish and Chinese Mandarin language are also growing in terms of importance. And so it's important to be fluent in certain languages so that you are not inhibited from doing business with someone who might not be fluent in your particular language. Corporate image and your brand value are part of this element of social grace, poise, and fitness. In another module, I define systems thinking as a process by which you can estimate or infer how one thing changes or influences the state of something else. Systems thinking also encourages us to view problems as part of an overall system rather than reacting to present outcomes or events. Today I am finding more companies and organizations relying on a systems or holistic approach to problem solving. And I think this is a good thing for two reasons. First, as we noted before, organizations cannot afford to operate in silos or a vacuum. Departments must communicate and be interconnected with each other in order to maximize productivity and harness their energy for greater results. But secondly, too many companies are missing strategic opportunities to outpace their competition or increase market share by not using a systems thinking approach to tackle problems, identify new market opportunities, or tap into the collective genius of their employees. When I consider the benefits of systems thinking, I'm reminded of the story about two blind men who are tasked with measuring an elephant. Neither blind man has even touched an elephant before, so this is a new experience for them. The first blind man feels the elephant and comments, "It feels very much like a wall." But the second blind man takes hold of the elephant's trunk and says, "No, it's not like a wall, it's much more like a big snake." Well, who's right and who's wrong? Actually, both blind men are correct. However, they lack complete knowledge, and therefore their measurements will probably not be accurate. This is the problem with so many organizations that are not using a systems thinking approach. They are only getting part of the answer right instead of all of it. In closing, I'd like to remind you that all ideas are worthwhile, and in the words of Leonardo da Vinci, all our knowledge has its origin in our perceptions. I hope all of you challenge yourselves to become sustainable leaders in what you do. I have described to you 7 key elements that can make it happen. Go for them. Thank you.